All right, guys, thank you. Welcome, not thank you. Welcome back to another episode of the 11 Yanks Breakdown Show. I'm Pete. You all know me. We have some very exciting guests with us today to break down the September. I'm sorry. What am I? Yeah, wait. Where am I?
October.
October qualifying window. I am all messed up, guys. We have Justin Moran from Stars and Stripes at Kicks Wish on Twitter. Megan Swanick. Megan, thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to have you. You've been doing some great coverage of the national team, kind of independently. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm working on a few books, and I also do reporting for Last Word on Sports. And yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for having
Very
me.
cool. Thanks. Good to have you. And then I didn't want to have him on, but Rocco Camiso called me and said I had to have Filippo Silva from Tactical Manager or my checks wouldn't clear. So unfortunately,
But
Filippo is here. How are you doing, man?
I didn't want to be here either, but he told me I had to be here, so here I am, unfortunately.
All right, guys. Well, we have a lot to talk about. We had a very exciting 3-game window in September. I need to have my morning coffee earlier.
October.
Oh my
I'm
God.
with you, though.
I did it again. October. All right. October. Sorry. All right. So in October, we had 3 very exciting games to talk about. And I thought before we dive into everything that is worth discussing, we could maybe start by, handing out grades for the window, overall grades for the national team as if, school grades. So from A plus to F minus, where would we put them? Why don't we start with Justin?
Oh, this is a hard one. I think it's probably a C or C minus. To get 6 points is not too bad.
Mhm.
The 2 wins at home. You're talking about the performances or purely the results?
Overall grade. I mean, you have to, I guess,
Okay.
take everything into
Yeah. I think I'll go C minus. Yeah, a lot of room for improvement still.
Cool. Megan?
So I'm a little bit more optimistic than Justin. I'm going to say, given the fact that we're still in second place, I'm going B minus or C plus, somewhere in that range. I think quite a bit of varied performance across the matches. I think we had an abysmal performance. I think we had some encouraging performances. I think there's a lot of questions remaining, even for both of the wins that we had. So I'm going to go B minus or C plus, somewhere in that range.
All right. Tact?
Man, I'm gonna be the nicest one here. What is this? What is all this negativity here? Okay, so let's be honest here. Yes, we're still on track of qualifying. We're in a very good position to qualify. I'm gonna give it a B, but let me explain why. The reason I'm gonna give it a B is one, we're still on track on qualifying. Two, players we been talking about got exposed again, right? I can't give a better grade because the results weren't that good. But the thing is, I think everyone sees it now. And even in the last game, when Greg likes it or not, his job has to have been on the line at that point, right? If he lost to Costa Rica, we don't know if he still would have been the coach. And look at the players he played, right? So I think Greg knows that, and we're going to talk about that later in the video. I don't think 6 points was ideal. I think 7 was the minimum that we should have gone for, but we're still on track to qualify with some ease. And I think certain aspects of it were exposed, and Greg is gonna have to change eventually. I think. I
So,
hope.
so your tack is that it's positive because we learned a lot of things that are actually going to benefit the team in the long run.
Confirmed. We confirmed.
We confirmed. Yes, we confirmed a lot of things. I understand that point of view. I'm going to go C. It would be more positive, except that in my opinion, this was the easiest window in all of qualifying for us, and to come out of it with less than 7 points was ultimately unacceptable in my opinion. So I'm going to give a C. Like you guys said, it's not the end of the world, and this is sort of the thing. It's like, despite our performances and results, we're still in second place. And so when people tell me CONCACAF is so hard, I go, we've played so bad most of the time, and yet we're still somehow in second place. So I'm not sure that CONCACAF is quite as hard, as some people like to claim it is. But we'll get into all of that. Guys, we try to start with positive, and there is a lot of positive from this window to talk about. So if we could just kind of go around the council table and everybody give one real positive takeaway from this window. Meg, why don't we start with you?
I think we're seeing the personality of this team really come to life. I think, there's a lot of one of the benefits but problems that comes with a lot of depth and a lot of rotation comes with the difficulty of seeing different rotations of players play together. And I think that maybe that's more impactful on some poor performances than necessarily youth, which I think Greg attributes a lot to.
Mhm.
But I think that especially picking up momentum in that Costa Rica game, we saw a lot of the heart and energy and impact of a lot of different players and how much they care about this come to life before the match, during, the way that they played, and also after the match, engaging with fans, engaging with each other. And I think it was exciting to see the personality of the team come to life over the course of this window, even beyond points and 2 wins
Yeah.
and an abysmal loss.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's true. Very true. Tack?
So I think for me, one of the main positives was the debunking of the experience myth, right? And what do I mean by that? I still think experience is important, right? We can't ignore it. Obviously, experienced players tend to be more consistent, just know more about the game in general from experience. But we also saw that a young team is capable of getting the job done in CONCACAF. So it means maybe we should start playing them more, let them gain experience, let them gain chemistry, let them learn each other's strengths, weaknesses. They can get us to Qatar. So why not play the most talented young guys rather than the older veterans that we know what they can do and what they can't do, mostly of what they can't do, right? We
Right.
saw it against Panama. So essentially the debunking of experience is everything myth, or the CONCACAF experience myth.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And I think also the whole idea of experience is like experience, of course, is beneficial when it
Yes.
comes with talent, right? But all the experience in the world isn't going to help you, you know? Like I can try to win a Miss America beauty pageant many times and fail. I have experience in a Miss America pageant. Doesn't mean I'm going to win just because I've done it before. That's a terrible analogy. It was the first one that came to my head.
Good analogy.
But yeah, it's like just because you've done, done something poorly in the past doesn't mean the next time you're going to be better at it. But we can get into that later. Justin Moran,
I
what is
think
your takeaway?
being able to see some new players step in and do well, Musa, Weah, both who hadn't played at all or weren't available in the first window, Chris Richards as well, and even just a glimpse of Matthew Hoppe. So just to give them that first taste and for them to come in and be able to kind of weather the storm. And I think with Richards in particular, coming in, maybe looking a little bit tentative for the first few minutes. And then as the game really opens up, being able to play the way we know they can. So it doesn't take 5 games. It doesn't take 10 games for this to happen, right? This can happen over the course of 30 minutes. So that's encouraging. I think it's also encouraging to see guys like Dest, who hadn't played as well in the previous window, really come into his own, look more comfortable with the team, flash his skills. I think those are great things to see. And going back to the experience bit, where is your experience? There are different levels. So we have 10 players in the Champions League. They're getting experience at the top level of the game. Now, they don't have World Cup experience, and some of them have more international experience than others. And then there's CONCACAF. We can leave that aside. And then there are guys playing in top 5 leagues or top 6 leagues in Europe. And then there are guys playing at lower levels. So you can have 10 years of experience in the USL. Are we claiming that makes someone interested or a good call up? Or then you can have higher levels like, oh, I've been with the national team. I've been in camps with Greg. So there's all these different definitions of experience. I would say that the experience that matters the most is obviously international level partially, but then that Champions League and top 6 leagues as well, where you're going to be facing the most intense opposition all the time.
And also the experience of having to compete week in and week out with 25 other guys who want your spot and who are very close to you in terms of talent, right? If you have a bad game or two, there are guys just as good who are waiting to take your spot on that lineup on the weekend. And that kind of experience is very, very valuable because it keeps players performing at a high level, right? I think the big positive takeaway for me was seeing technical players on the field together and how much that elevates everybody. So when everybody is on the same technical wavelength and has the same ability to play when time and space are compressed, you get that, this team is greater than the sum of its parts sort of performance that we saw, particularly, in the second half against Jamaica, but particularly against Costa Rica. When everybody is on the same level or similar levels of talent, it just makes everybody around them better. They trust each other. We saw some of the patterns of play, some of the progression, some of the off-ball movement was very fluid, and it wasn't perfect, certainly, but you can see how we would look. We saw for the first time how we would look when everybody on the field is on the same talent wavelength. And I think that was really, really encouraging.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. So any other thoughts on what anybody else said before we move on?
What you just said, it's just so rare not to have those one or two names and faces in the lineup that do tend to slow things down or not play at the same page. Play at the same pace or be on the same page with their teammates. So like you said, It's a team sport. It's a weak link sport. When you have 11 guys out there who are capable, it's very different from having 9 or 10 who are capable.
Yeah, and remember, Greg Berhalter is a human too, so he does get attached to certain players, does create bonds and friendships, and sometimes it might be hard for you to leave one of your friends out of the roster, right?
Yeah.
And you want to keep them there. So I just think it's personally time for Greg to move on from some of his favorites. I know some of them will still be there, but a few of them, it's time for him to move on because new talent showed up. And when we go back to 2019, some of these guys being in the roster made sense, right? So we didn't have some of the young guys, or they were really too young, like 17, some were 16, right? But now we have so many options that are showing up and they're proving themselves in better leagues, like Justin said, in Champions League teams, Bundesliga teams, Premier League teams, that Greg does have to let go of his favorites eventually.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see if he does. I agree with you, Filippo, on that point. I think there's a few favorites who have performed well, whether it's the Gold Cup or over the years, who did not perform well at all this window. And it'll be interesting to see if he does or is capable of that change. Because I think whether Greg is capable of change is a key question that I have for this team.
Well, you and me both, Meg. All right. Well, let's dig into some of the issues. And I don't want to call them negatives, but there are issues or questions that we take away from this camp. And we could go around the circle and everybody talk about, one issue or question mark that you have. And Meg, you kind of alluded just now to it. I don't know if that was the one you were going to talk about, but why don't you start us off again?
Yeah, I mean, over the course of this summer, I was encouraged actually by the concept of depth within the U.S. men's national team. I think that we had one team play in the Nations League and we had one team play in Gold Cup, and it was very different teams, entirely different teams playing in different leagues with different tests on that level, different levels of experience, whatever that might mean across how old they are or what leagues they're playing in, and they both performed well and they both came away with that ultimate trophy. And so I think, one of the questions, I feel confident we're qualifying for the World Cup. I think, despite Panama aside, the first match against Honduras aside, first matches across a number of games aside, I feel confident we're qualifying. I think what we're figuring out here is what our depth looks like. Yeah. And I think in Panama, we gambled on a depth that I'm suddenly wondering if it exists. And I think that there are certain players within the quote unquote depth that don't belong there anymore. And I wonder if Greg is capable of shuffling them out and bringing new players in to test them. So I would say that depth is the biggest issue and question that I have after this window, especially given the rotation in Panama that didn't perform. Greg was definitely banking on the rotation and the depth performing. They didn't. Mm-hmm. And there's players within our depth that we do have that weren't even called into this window that I want to see brought into the squad and getting integrated into the quote unquote system, but also starting to get reps playing with one another. Because like I said, I think more than youth or experience, I think getting certain players experience working with one another is more key to any performance that we might have. So yeah, I guess, we've got a lot of depth, so I don't want to summarize by saying that depth is the issue, but I would say the type of depth might be the issue for me.
I agree with you, Meg. And after this round, we'll go back over what we said and talk about, potential solutions, because when we highlight issues or questions, we do want to talk about, well, how do we fix that? So, Tack.
Yeah, I actually agree with everything Meg said. I'm going to put another point. But I'm not worried about the depth. I'm worried about how Greg selects the players that we're going to have in this depth, right? Because we had better options on the bench against Panama. He just chose not to use it.
Yeah.
So essentially we're blaming Greg again, but for a reason, right? I think one of the negatives for me was this. Me and Pete actually talked about this quite a bit, a few times. In modern soccer, you need a goalkeeper that can play out of the back with his feet. It's actually very important for many different aspects of the game, not just soaking up pressure, but building out of the back, breaking the line passes. All of that is needed when you have a goalkeeper that can play with his feet. And we wanted to see Zach Steffen get another chance because he is better than Turner with his feet. But to me, that was a negative because we saw a Zach Steffen that continues to be not the best Steffen we know, right? He looks rusty, and it makes sense. The guy's not playing. He's
Yeah.
never playing. So the negative for me right there is we probably won't have the best out of Zach Steffen until he's consistently playing for his team, looking sharp. To me, that's a negative because I feel safe when Turner's playing. But we need, if we want to evolve and take the next step, we need that goalkeeper that can play with his feet. And Zach didn't look good on distribution, in my opinion. Was very average, better than Turner for sure, but nothing special. And I keep saying this. I personally think Matt Turner probably would have saved that ball, and Costa Rica wouldn't have got the early lead.
Mm.
That's just an if, right? Maybe he wouldn't, but based on what Turner's been doing for us at the shot stopping end, I think he would have saved it. So I saw it as a negative because I had high hopes that Zach could become that and fight. But right now, if we go into the November camp, I have to say go with Turner right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Justin.
I'm along the same lines as Meg. All of the positives were with that first group, those first 12 or 13 best players, the ones who did really well in the first game and the third game in the window. And the problems in Panama were they shouldn't have shocked anyone. They shouldn't have caught us by surprise. I remember when I saw that lineup come out, I thought there's one player in the midfield who's capable of progressing the ball. That's Yunus Musa. And there's one creative attacker on the field. That's Tim Weah. There are 4 players around them, 2 on each line, who don't do either of those things. And so I'm not sure what Greg was expecting to happen. I'm sure he was expecting different performances from Acosta and Leggett than the ones that he got. But that was disastrous. And I think it speaks to how Greg picks his lineups and his ability to fit different skill sets with players that actually work together. So yeah. Acosta can work in a lineup with 2 players who are capable of driving the attack forward if he's that defensive stopper. We've seen him do that role, and he's performed it well in the past. But with Leggett playing so negatively, that leaves all of the onus on Musa to actually drive it forward. And so he's trying to make plays by himself, and now he's making giveaways because he's going 1v3 or 1v2 in the midfield. Yeah. So those are problems that it should be easy to anticipate just looking at the players and saying, okay, what are his strengths? What are his weaknesses? When you put several players out there whose weaknesses are similar, Zardes and Ariola together on the front line, 2 guys who are not known for their amazing touch or their ability to combine and create in the final third, you're going to have those similar issues. So player selection, player evaluation, lineups, and being able to put players together whose strengths and weaknesses work together to create a stronger team, and then actually getting those correct players in for the games when we can't go Pulisic, Reyna, Dest.
Right.
Pete, can I add one thing to what Justin said that I think it's important for everyone to think about this? Look at what Justin just said. We made lineup changes each game, right? Players with different playing styles for each game. But the tactics were the exact same, as if those tactics work for anyone, right? He completely ignored. So it's what Justin just said. You can put those players to play under different circumstances, tactics. But he played the same way he faced Jamaica. He wanted to face Panama the exact same way with 7 different players.
Yeah.
We got to remember that.
It's what, Michael Madrid said in our live stream, I think, after the last game, was Greg is conceited enough to believe that his tactics are interchangeable no matter who he plays. And it's sort of his tactics are the supreme winner of everything. And, player quality or skill set or talent level doesn't matter. Do you guys think that's true, at least to a degree?
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing I'd say about what Justin said is I think a lot of to-do has been made about Yunus Musa's performance in Panama. And like in the post-match against Costa Rica, different reporters were bringing up how he hadn't performed well, or a lot of people were saying how he didn't perform well. And Greg had a response, which his responses tend to be vague, but he had a response saying that they analyzed what impacted Musa's underperformance and adjusted. And I have to wonder if it wasn't just personnel that they adjusted.
Yeah. I mean, I
And
think it's true that he probably didn't have his best game against Panama, but I also saw, at least in the first half, he was the one of the only guys who had moments where he was trying to drive that game forward
I
and was just
agree.
let down by people around him, you know.
I agree. I think too much has been made about his performance. I mean, nobody had a stellar performance in Panama, but he's been critiqued, but I think it's not entirely his doing. And yeah, I was interested to see a lot of people harping on his performance in particular because I
Well,
don't know
because
if
he's
he'd
not
be.
in MLS, so they'll choose him based on where he plays, right?
Right. We'll attack the 18-year-old. That's the guy that we want
Let's
to blame.
attack the 18-year-old because he doesn't play in MLS, so it's all his fault. He should have carried us against Panama, scored 2 goals, maybe even a hat trick, and maybe carried Lejen Acosta in his back. And let's take him to an MRI after the game to check if his back is fine. That's maybe
Yeah.
what they should have done.
I also think that he had like 1 or 2 bad plays in the first 10 minutes, and people just couldn't, they paid attention to that, and then that impacted the cloud of their perception of the whole match. So over the window, he was one of the successes for me. And I think that he didn't have his best match in Panama, but I don't want to overemphasize his underperformance. And I don't know that it's his fault. And in Berhalter's post Costa Rica match comments, I wonder if what he was vaguely hinting at is in assessing his underperformance, is it personnel?
Yeah. Well, to your point about his bad moments against Panama, I actually, because I break down every game tactically on Patreon after, and the moments that I think people are referring to are him supposedly over dribbling, right, and losing the ball in bad areas. But if you watch those moments closely, oftentimes the reason he's over dribbling is because there's no off ball movement from his teammates. They're all standing next to a defender. So he's like, I literally have nobody to give this to right now. And I don't want to pass back like my buddy Sebastian. So I'm going to just try and dribble through and then end up losing the ball. So it's like, yeah, it's a team, right? You can't expect that no one's going to move off the ball to show for it and then wonder why he lost it.
It's the Messi effect, or what Christian Pulisic has dealt with, where a guy receives the ball who his teammates know he can create, and teammates go, let's see what he does.
Yeah. Yeah. Tack, you were going to say something?
I forgot what I was going to say about Greg right now.
We'll get into it. Don't worry. So I think for me, the issue, I don't want to call it an issue or be overly critical of it because I think there are some easy fixes, but when I look at the team against Costa Rica, we had mostly a good game. There's 2 things that stood out to me as things that we need to try and fix going forward or that can use improvement. One is that all of our entries into the final third, or all of our effective entries into the final third, came in wide areas, right? And that's great. We clearly have the ability to overload in wide areas with fullbacks like Dest and Robinson, and then you have wingers like Aronson and Weah, and their ability to combine in wide areas is fantastic. And oftentimes we would get the ball into those wide areas, and then maybe our final product was lacking. But what we didn't do enough, in my opinion, was, final third entries more centrally. And I think that is because of, we still lack an elite chance creator in that midfield. And again, I don't think the trio of, MMA, Adams, Musa, and McKennie is a bad one. I think they can start many games for us and be very effective, especially in CONCACAF. But I do think if we're going to graduate to that next level, we need to think about the kind of midfielders that we have and maybe see if we add a midfielder who can, do more line breaking passes in midfield and just give us something different. Because having that will also create more wides. Let's say you have a Gio Reyna or even a guy like Luca De La Torre, who it's a crying shame he didn't get more minutes in this window. They are very capable of making line breaking passes centrally, both in transition, attacking transitions, and, in possession. And I just think that would add another dimension to our game. And as the quality goes up, we're going to have to be able to break teams down in different ways, because good quality teams with good coaching will be able to scout how we break into those final third areas and shut us down and develop game plans that make it more difficult for us. So it's not a big issue, but I think adding variance to our attacking play. The other one, like I said, is the final ball. And as far as solutions to that, we'll get into it when we talk about solutions. But let's hop right into it. Meg, your issue that you saw was, really, can Greg learn about depth? Talk me through what you think should be done going forward, about our depth options.
Well, I'd like to see a different kind of depth balance brought in. I think that there's players, like you said, in terms of Luca De La Torre, or you could say the same of Matthew Hoppe, or even Chris Richards, who saw the start in that last match, who I'd like to see getting in there more and more often, or people who weren't brought into camp this window, like Joe Scally, for one, who Greg places so much precedent on experience and experience with his system. And I think that for a coach, someone understandably who has a very specific style of play that he wants to integrate into the United States culture, into the culture of how the national team plays, he places a lot of importance on familiarity with that system. And I think that one thing I would like to see in that shift in the balance and depth that we're currently leaning on is starting to take this opportunity to bring different players into that pool of experience and depth in that system, and leaning away from certain players who have experience with his system but aren't performing within it, and might have graduated from it. They've played their part, no. I wish them all well, but I think that I have a few different players that I think it's time to say goodbye to, and they're probably not surprising to anybody watching this stream or here talking about it.
And we will discuss a lot of those players in detail. But yeah, I mean, I think I agree with you. I think in the next window, we need to see more of guys like who were in the roster, Hoppe, De La Torre, Richards, and also guys who weren't in the roster, Joe Scally, Conrad De La Fuente, very possibly, even Julian Green, who I know a lot of people don't think he should be called up, but the fact that we don't even give him an opportunity at all in 2021 is baffling to me. And oftentimes, the knock against him was he isn't always starting in the Bundesliga. And yet we call a guy who hasn't started 3 of, LA Galaxy's last 4 games. And that doesn't appear to be an issue, So I just don't understand that. I really don't, But I'm with you, Meg. Anybody got thoughts on what Meg is saying?
Yeah, and I think most of the negatives or criticism is going to be towards it's all going to be around what Meg just said, right, in different little points, but it's all the same thing. It's the player selection, letting go of some of his favorites, right? My main concern is this: the guys he claims don't have experience to perform or whatsoever. I truly believe, and I think most of us believe, and we just got a pretty damn good example of it, is they're good enough to get us to Qatar. The young guys, they're good enough. If they're good enough to get us to Qatar, and the veterans supposedly are as well, but I do have my doubts if the veterans actually could get us to Qatar alone. They hadn't in the past.
Russia. They didn't last time.
They didn't in Russia. And when we talk about these veterans, right, Leggett, Roldan, Areola, Acosta, these are not 33, 34-year-olds Clint Dempsey's, right, that you bring in that actually have Premier League experience, World Cup experience. That's not who they are, right? Yeah. So it's not really like are they more experienced than these young guys? I don't think they really are. They're just older, right? Yeah. They're just older. So I think if the young guys are capable of getting us to Qatar, and this core of young guys is probably going to be a good part of the roster of 2026. It's the core we're building right now. You need to let them play, because when we get to the World Cup, these are our guys. They need to know each other's strengths and weaknesses. They need to build chemistry. You only do that by playing with each other. As you play together more and more, you also build a bond. You become a family together. You live through experiences. And we're completely ignoring that to keep these mediocre players that Greg has a bond with, but he doesn't want to break that bond with some of them. You see after the game, that picture, I know it became almost like a meme, but it's just like we're celebrating the win, and then Greg's like hugging Areola like his child. It's just, I mean, I like that because it shows that the coach likes his players, but it's just, and I hope he has a good relationship with Areola, but that just symbolizes what it is. It's Greg's like, I'm not letting go of you, man. I don't care how many bad performances you have, how injury prone you are. I'll play you all 3 games. You're always starting for me. It's time for Greg to let go. And yes, I agree that it's not like get rid of all of them at once, but get 2 of them out next camp, put in some other young guys. The other camp, get 2 of them. And then by the end of World Cup qualifying, we don't need to have these guys anymore. They don't add. And I keep asking people, what exactly can bring up Areola, Leggett, Roldan, all of them. I might forget one of them, Acosta. If you talk about each single one of them, what are they good at, right? And everyone comes up with the same BS excuses. It's experience and leadership. Well, the Jet just proved leadership is probably not his strength, right? With that attitude of not celebrating with the team or whatsoever when he doesn't dress up. Areola, everything they compliment Areola requires him staying 10 to 20 yards away from the ball. It's like, you're great, Areola, but you got to stay away from the ball, dude. Don't touch the ball, for Christ's sake. But it's soccer. You got to touch the ball eventually. You can't play with that. So that, and Acosta as well, right? It's, everything is just defense. So I think it's time for Greg to let go. And that's pretty much just expanding on what Meg said. And I think you guys are going to probably expand even more on it right now.
Yeah. No, I think exactly. I agree with pretty much everything Tack said. Justin?
Yeah, we're in this interesting moment as a national team with our player pool, and you guys have all been talking about it already, where our best players are very young, and our older generation is comparatively very weak to most of the players and the teams that we've had in the past 5-10 years or more than that. And in this moment, we need a leader who is able to put young players in and instill them with confidence in themselves and freedom to play the way they know they can play. And that doesn't happen if an imperfect performance means that the next day the next game you're going to be benched for a lesser player who offers less to the team and doesn't help us win. So bringing Chris Richards into camp and having him sit on the bench and see Walker Zimmerman play twice and see Mark McKenzie have not an amazing game in Panama, and then say, okay, now we're really in a dire situation. Now you can come on the field, Chris. That doesn't fill him with confidence.
Right.
That's not helping these players to flourish. I think, just to add on to that one more thing, it doesn't mean, so let's say that he leaves 4 or 5 of these veterans off in the next window. That doesn't mean that they are banished and that they can never play for the national team again. There might be some who honestly don't reach that level in the future, but you can bring different players in to different camps to see what they offer in this camp. Okay, now let's test Julian Green. Let's see what Julian Green offers. Part of rotating and having a big squad should be players moving in and out. So it goes back to kind of what Filippo was talking about with the brotherhood, that mindset that this group cannot be broken, but that's not healthy and that's not competition, right? So it has to be a meritocracy. You have to earn your spot. And if you have a terrible performance, you can lose your spot, or at least you can have a window where other players come in to challenge for it to see if they can perform better.
I think that's so true about a meritocracy, Justin, because it's frustrating that there seems to be a certain standard for some players. For example, let's take a guy like Josh Sargent, who I think all of us believe has talent and is still very young and could still be involved in the future. When he wasn't in this window, I don't think any of us were particularly unhappy. At least I wasn't. I can't speak for you guys. I love Josh Sargent as much as anybody, but he hasn't been performing for the national team. And as a consequence of that, was left off of this window. I think that's fair. However, many guys haven't been performing for the national team and continue to get called up almost despite performance. Like regardless of how you perform, you're there. And that is what you're saying is super unhealthy and really baffling, and it's, I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories floating around the internet and there's not maybe a ton of evidence for all of them, right? But it is baffling that almost always the guys who continually get called up regardless of performance are these MLS lifers. And I think that does fuel conspiracy theory and that does fuel questions about why, because it's not like Berhalter is incapable of having some accountability like we saw with both PFOC and Sargent, who weren't performing and they were cut, So it does definitely get people talking. You know what I mean?
And there are some things underneath that. The one other thing I forgot to add was just to be able to simplify tactics. The more complex the tactics are, the more difficult they are to learn and the more time it takes, the more difficult it is to introduce new players. So the simpler they are, that gives us freedom to be able to bring players in and out and not have to be so married to this group that whether they perform well or perform bad, well, they've had 3 January camps with Greg. So they've had, 90 days or whatever of instruction in this really detailed way he wants to play. That doesn't work in an international setup.
Well, not just that, Justin. He's also in a national team and not in a club. He doesn't have 6 months with the players. He has like a week or two. How much information can a player absorb in those limited days while you're traveling down to Panama, going back to the United States? He has to make it as simple as possible, and there's no way around it. But he might be thinking he's still coaching the Columbus Crew or something.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think he might be overcomplicating things. And just a few points on what you guys said. And on the note of building the roster with certain things in mind, I would like to see Greg recalibrate what he means by leadership, because like talking to different players and interacting with them in press conferences, the older players and the quote unquote more experienced players don't necessarily bring the presence of leadership to those conversations or to the field. I think that there are very young players. Brendan Aronson comes to mind, who I think bring an incredible amount of leadership and encouragement to the field. And they don't necessarily need to be older or more integrated into the system to be a quote unquote leader. So I think it's naive to think that the ones who have been around longer can have the leadership in the locker room. Sometimes it's the opposite, actually.
Yeah.
Pete, can I ask Meg one question before you move on?
Yeah.
So you've been following the national team up close. You were even traveling where they are, correct?
Yeah.
From what you've seen, I don't know if you were able to attend any practice training sessions or you've seen the players up close. Who did you see with more leadership besides Greg, right? Besides the coach, from players, maybe 2 or 3 players. Who did you notice from what we don't see from the game, right? In the game, we see in the field and we talk about who shows leadership. From outside of the 90 minutes they're in the field, which players caught your attention the most?
So there's a lot that I want to just caveat that it's a really good question that goes behind the scenes, like how they are together in hotels, who they are, and who I hear through the grapevine that is impacting the atmosphere in the hotels and contributing to the bond, which I think is evident that they have. And from what I've heard in terms of that bond, in terms of personality, like players like Weston McKennie or Serginho Dest are contributing to the personality behind the scenes. In terms of what I do see, who I see in the warm-up, in the press conferences, who are contributing to leadership and mentality in dire times in Panama and outside of it, I'm putting Brendan Aronson really far up there, actually. I really rate his character and his resolve and the energy that he brings and encourages in his teammates outside of play, and it's really evident to see in person. So I really rate Brendan Aronson on that leadership spectrum. I would also say some unsurprising names like Tyler Adams. I think he is pivotal on that front. I think that's really evident in a few different areas. And I would also say Matt Turner. And I'm actually really in the in-between in the Matt Turner-Zach Steffen debate, but I think Matt Turner is a clear leader. And I think he has a clear impact on that front with the team.
Yeah. Well, this is great that Tack brought this up because I kind of wanted to throw it to you now, Meg. You know, we didn't get to attend any games, or maybe Justin did. I don't know. But, you know, what we see on TV and what you see actually being there is very different. So could you tell us a little bit about, you know, things that you saw on the field or in their interaction or in training, wherever at all, that might be of interest to fans that maybe we don't always get a glimpse of with our limited TV viewing experience?
Yeah, I think so. One thing I will say as a brief caveat is I was not in Austin, Texas. I was in Mexico for that match, so I wasn't there in person. I was at the Canada versus Mexico match, which I have a lot to say about, but that's a different and incredible experience. But in terms of Panama and in terms of Columbus, things that might be interesting. So in Panama, I mean, I think a lot has been said about Greg and whether or not you think he's the best coach and displeasure that might be present with players to coach. And what I would say is that it's hard to entirely tell. And like Greg said in that post-match press conference, it's sports and it's humans. And I think sometimes it's hard to know what is losing the locker room and what is frustration after a really poor performance. But what I would say after Panama is that the media after that game interviewed a number of players in the tunnel as they were entering the bus, like right after the match, as they're leaving, not press conference. There was the press conference with Walker Zimmerman and Greg later, but then there was just grabbing players as they're leaving the field, and the game is fresh. And the frustration on all of them was very evident. And I think certain players, to me, Matt Turner feels like he's going to bat for Greg. I think he got a number of questions about tactics and things like that, and he was a little bit more defensive. Something I thought that was interesting is that the players are evidently, to me, steering away from CONCACAF narratives and whether it's more difficult than where they're playing in Europe in particular. The European-based players, I think, are steering away from CONCACAF being more difficult. Tyler Adams was the first one grabbed in that tunnel. And the first question he was asked was about conditions. And he seemed evidently frustrated to me. Not frustrated, but dismissive, actually. And was like, I mean, it's humid. And like shrugged his shoulders a little bit. And I think that's something to note about the match in Panama, is that the atmosphere and the fan atmosphere was very different from El Salvador and Honduras. I think Panamanians in general were like very warm, and not that Honduras or El Salvador wasn't, but very different atmospheres. They were late to arrive. It wasn't full when the game started. They had an incredible energy in the atmosphere when they did all arrive. But there was a notable difference between the energy and desire to like beat the US in terms of Panama versus Honduras and El Salvador. I think that's worth noting. And in terms of conditions, the field was fine. It was hot. It wasn't that hot. I mean, I don't know. I've lived in East Asia. I think you have too, Pete, actually. It's like, it's, the humidity is not that. It wasn't hot.
I just want to interject here, because let's talk a little bit about CONCACAF. We've been sort of fed this narrative that CONCACAF is like going to hell. And, the fields are either waterlogged, or the grass is too long, or they're extremely bumpy. The fans all want to kill you. It is like, I feel like, at least watching this qualifying, I don't think the fields have been particularly bad in either Honduras, Panama, or El Salvador. They may not have been pristine, and maybe it's different watching in person, but at least from what I saw on TV, I didn't think the fields were particularly bad. I thought the crowds were aggressive and loud, but not hostile. Nobody got anything thrown at them from what I saw. Maybe you saw something different. I wonder sometimes if this CONCACAF narrative is overhyped, partially to, excuse results, and partially because I just think as Americans, I don't want to get too political here, but we still have a certain mentality about Central America that I think is unfair, and that maybe is a little bit too Hollywood. Because every time I've been to Central America, I have very different experiences than, things that I hear from the media. And I just wonder if you guys agree with me. Is CONCACAF really as horrific a place to play soccer, or is that not really true anymore?
No, Pete. So from someone also with a lot of South American experiences, that's what they love to say, right? CONCACAF experience, talk about CONMEBOL experience. All players deal with that, right? In different scenarios. I don't follow the African Confederation, but I've talked to guys from Nigeria, and they said it's crazy there, right? CONMEBOL qualifiers, I've seen it. It's completely crazy. You go to Bolivia, the altitude there is something that should be legal for the players to play. But you go there and you play, and Bolivia just beat Paraguay 4-0. Because of that. That is a factor, and no one cares. Brazil tried to deport players mid-game against Argentina. No, they actually did deport players. Believe it or not, that happened.
Right.
There has been fights. There have been fans dying. As bad as that sounds, and it shouldn't happen, the hostile environment exists in South America as much as Central America. It might be worse. They'll go to your hotel in South America as well. They'll go to your hotel and just play fireworks. All night long before you face the team. It happens. And what many fail to see is the following. When in South America, you have that environment, but you also have world-class players. You don't have this in CONCACAF. You have this environment. Yeah, it's not an easy environment to play, but I'm sorry, most of the players are very limited technically, players from USL level or average MLS players, and I just think it's an excuse at the end of the day, because it's a narrative they use to feed to defend these mediocre players. That's the way they defend it. It's like it's CONCACAF. It's hard. Can you believe that some people are saying that France would struggle in away games in CONCACAF? I think France would struggle to score less than 3 goals in most of these opponents. That's what they would struggle. Yeah, if you go to France and say, hey, you got to beat them all 5-0, then yeah, they might struggle to score 5 goals. But they're not going to struggle to win these away games. Brazil and South America, they face these environments. They win. They don't complain about it. Now, one thing I wanted to add here, and I don't want to take the mic too long, I blame partially MLS for this, not just because of the narrative, right? You can get your young players used to this at the club level by getting more involved with the region. But MLS doesn't get involved with the region. They want to keep these other markets suppressed They want to hype up Liga MX and MLS, and they completely ignore the rest of Central America. While you could, in a club level, get these players involved with a better CONCACAF Champions League, more countries involved, that would bring also more money to those countries. They would grow as well, and it would make CONCACAF better in general. That's a whole different argument. But these players, and I use this example, like Caden Clark is in New York Red Bulls. New York Red Bulls goes to play in the CONCACAF Champions against an El Salvador team. He's going to get that experience right there. It's not going to be something new. But MLS doesn't get involved with the region as much, right? They have their whole protect the loser system. And that's the problem. It becomes an excuse and a narrative to defend all their mediocre players, which we keep seeing time in and time out. And there you go. Panama was the worst team in the last World Cup. Let's remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Panama and El Salvador would not have qualified for the Hex, I believe. They're the 7th and 8th ranked teams in FIFA's rankings. The Hex only included teams 1 through 6.
Right.
So we're playing teams that wouldn't have even been in the qualifying cycle.
Right. And Megan, I keep hearing you on Twitter or seeing some of your posts about how warm and friendly and welcoming everybody was in some of these Central American places. I just don't know if I buy this idea about how awful it is to go there. And, you know, some people act like literally you're going to play in like, you know, a Taliban stronghold, or it's almost laughable at some point.
Yeah. Just briefly, I would say, to add to that, absolutely. I mean, I've been fortunate to travel a lot in my life, and outside of the stadium as well as inside of the stadium, people are very welcoming. And even when outside of a US context, like I went to Azteca for Canada, Mexico, I wasn't in the press box for that match. I was just there by myself. The most that happened is people wanted to take a picture with me and ask where I was from, or like tap me on the shoulder. I think people thought I was Canadian, and people would tap me on the shoulder and be like, you can cheer if you want. Like, it's very warm and friendly.
Yeah.
I've definitely been in antagonistic atmospheres, but never in never in any of the CONCACAF countries, to be honest with you. So I think these narratives could have been at one point true, but don't feel true now. And I mean, CONCACAFing happens, like at the end of the Panama match, like kicking balls away from the field or people running onto the pitch or things like that happen. But I do think it's a narrative that's overblown.
I agree. Do you have anything else, Meg, before we move on, just to talk about things that you could see or got, you know, whiff of, or, you know, from being in locations in the stadium that we don't see?
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of things I could say about that. So this window, I was in Panama and I was in Columbus. I mean, I guess I'll say a few brief things. One, I will say that Columbus is Lower.com Field is an incredible stadium, and it's a little bit funny that Columbus and Austin were the two host US-based cities for this window, because I wasn't in Austin, but in Columbus, a number of native Columbans, I don't know if that's what you would call them, were showing their anti-Austin pride and asking me like, so we're better than Q2. And, you know, a few of the capos were like, maybe from Austin, AO members. And they were like, I think that guy's from Austin. Why is he here? So
that's good to see.
The rivalry is real, but friendly, I like to think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No,
I was going to say, don't you think they chose it to promote the new stadiums? That was probably the reason.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's definitely the reason. There's nothing to do with the places themselves.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
We got to get these, you know, MLS stadiums hyped. Anything else, Meg?
No, I would say, I mean, there's a lot more I could say about the Panama match, but I think, just highlighting the frustration on all of the players after the match, and then the leadership of certain players that felt evident in person. One other thing I'll say about like Brendan Aronson or Tyler Adams is, even if they didn't have their best match in Panama, you know, a lot that you might not see on television, just like Brendan Aronson, as soon as Panama scored, was like running back to his spot, ready for the game to get replayed. And he's just always ready to go and hustling, and didn't have his best match, but it feels very evident in person. Likewise, Miles Robinson, actually.
Yeah.
Well, a lot for those two players. You know, you can feel the energy that they bring to the squad and to the game in their roles that might not always be captured from afar.
I think young players can absolutely be leaders, and I think that's what I hear you saying when you're talking about a lot of these guys, Adams, Aronson. They're real leaders regardless of age.
That's how I feel
Guys,
like.
we do have to wrap up soon, but before we do, I wanted to talk specifically about these 5 players that I think there are some questions about, to say the least, from the fan base. I don't hear this from the mainstream media very much, but Gyasi Zardes, Paul Arriola, Sebastian Lletget, Roldan, and Acosta, I think, are 5 players who, it's fair to say, did not cover themselves in glory in this window. I want to go briefly through each one of these players and just get your thoughts. Should they be in the roster come November for the Mexico-October games, and why or why not? Let's start with Christian Roldan. Justin. You're still on mute.
What does the team lose by not having Roldan in the squad? What is he bringing to the squad? I'm fine leaving him out.
Okay. Filippo?
Absolutely no.
Meg?
I leave him out, I think.
Yeah, I'm with all of you guys. I mean, just to quote you one stat, and I realize this one stat isn't the whole picture, but 29 caps, 0 goals, 1 assist. We have better on both the wing and at the dual 8 position. No need for Roldan anymore, in my opinion, despite having a good season in MLS, which a lot of Seattle fans would point to. The next one would be Sebastian Lletget. Sebastian Lletget, Megan.
No, I think he's done.
Like done for good, or at least for now?
Not forever. I wouldn't say never again, but I would say after his performance this window, there's no reason for bringing him in. I'd like to see, again, a big theme for me is bringing in fresh players, younger players, players unfamiliar with the system, and knowing that we're likely qualifying. We are qualifying, getting them reps together and figuring out who goes where. And I don't think Sebastian Lletget is coming to Qatar, and I don't think he needs to be brought into the next window.
All right. Filippo.
Yeah, so the next window also, we only have 2 games. So I don't want to see rotation. I want you to play both games, our best 11. It's just 2 games. There's no excuses with that. And what we got to ask ourselves is, off the bench, what does Lletget bring? And do we have better options? We have a bunch of better options that can be off the bench. Bucio, De La Torre are options. Julian Green can be brought in. Probably not the ideal moment to bring Julian Green now, since he was never there, but De La Torre, Bucio, and then you also have Yunus Musa. You can go Giovanni Reina central eventually. There is no reason to have Lletget. He would be a bench player, not rotating. I would leave him out. But the question is if we would leave it out, right? Not Greg, because I think Greg will bring him.
No, this is our opinion, not Greg's.
Okay,
we all
I think
know
Greg will bring him.
Greg will absolutely bring him. Yeah. Justin.
No, I'd leave him out. I think you guys have mostly covered it. Even if we did bring a big squad next month, you could be adding Green, you could be adding Alan Senora maybe. Reina could be back and he could be in the midfield. Richie Ledesma recently got back into training with PSV, and he's a very creative player. We really need more players like that, like what you were talking about, Pete, with only being able to penetrate from outside and not from the middle. So there's so many reasons and so many guys who could be in that spot. Yeah, there's just, I think he actually might have had his Ewell moment this window, where it's so bad that even Greg does actually back off.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't included in the last day roster at all, not even on the bench, which apparently, I don't know if you saw anything about this, Meg, but apparently Nico Cantor reported that after the game when they were celebrating with the fans, Lletget wasn't. Did you see that too, or is that just?
I didn't see him celebrating with fans, but yeah, I did see that report from Nico. I'd have to dig more into it, but yeah, I didn't see him celebrating with fans either.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you all. I mean, I feel like I have been saying this for the longest time now, and I have sparked many Twitter happy debates or sometimes.
Twitter tacticians.
Huh?
The Twitter tacticians.
The Twitter tacticians have told me many times how wrong I am for dismissing him. And yeah, I mean, I just don't think he offers enough to this team on either side of the ball to justify his place anymore. Now we'll get into some of the guys that might be a little more controversial. Let's talk about Kellen Acosta. I'm going to start I still think Kellen Acosta has a place for now in a roster, but that our use of him should be extremely minimal and only as an additional defensive presence when trying to protect a lead. So if you take off an attacking player for Kellen Acosta in the last 10 minutes of an intense game, I could understand that. But, for me, he should be there just because we don't have a real backup for Tyler Adams, but not a immediate solution to Tyler. Justin.
I would be okay with having Acosta on the roster in this next window. I don't think we necessarily need him. I think there are lots of ways to play where we don't have a single six. It doesn't have to be a player who just swaps in exactly for Tyler Adams with exactly the same role. We know that both McKennie and Musa are capable of playing in a double pivot, and they have a lot of good defensive bite. They're very aggressive defending. I think Luca De La Torre, Gianluca Busio are also capable of being one of the players, as long as you have someone more defensive and more athletic like McKennie or Musa next to them. So there's lots of ways to play without him. I personally would leave him out, but I hear the argument for his inclusion. I also think it's time to start testing out other defensive mids. So I'd like to see Tanner Tessman, Christian Cappy, maybe get another look at James Sands, bring in at least one of those guys, if not two, this next window. Maybe one of them along with Acosta. There's different ways of doing it, so that if they don't look good in camp, you do still have that option as well as the double pivot. But I'd be okay leaving him out, at least for one window.
Okay. Tack?
I wouldn't bring him. And here's the thing. Anyone that says he's the second best option for the men's national team for the current poll we have, for the six, right, the backup, is right. But why is he the only option we have as a backup? It's because he's the only one that gets a chance after Tyler. We don't give anyone else a chance. And by chance, I don't mean like put one game and there you go. He got so many chances that he had a few good performances, and that's what people hold on to in their minds of saying, okay, he's the backup. So I wouldn't bring him. And I know it's Mexico is not the right game to test anyone. I hope we don't have to test anyone. I hope Tyler's there for the full 90. And Jamaica away also might be tougher than we think, depending on the players they get. Or it might be easier than we think, depending on what they do, as they're the most unpredictable team in this qualifying. So I think we need to move on from Acosta. The only thing he provides is a lot of hustle on defense, hard tackles, and some trash talk. That's all he offers there in the back. Nothing more.
Yeah.
And he picked up good form in Gold Cup, created an illusion for certain fans. People saw it through it right now, and Greg didn't even play him this much this window, just one game. Well, actually, I think he came in. He came in the first one as well, right, against Jamaica.
Yeah.
For a little bit towards the end. I think we need to start putting other options. And then, like Justin said there, you can try, or you said earlier in the video too, tactical flexibility. Stop using the same exact formation. Switch it to a double pivot. And there you go. Put different players, quality players, adjust. Stop being stubborn, Greg. So I wouldn't bring Acosta, me personally. But yes, he is the second best option because he got so many chances to do it. That's why.
We've never experimented with another formation. We've never tried Musa, McKennie, De La Torre, really at the six. Another thing I think you could do with Acosta is if you played a back three with Chris Richards as the central defender, he could actually step into midfield in possession and almost play as a faux six, what we saw James Sands do at the Gold Cup, except Richards' passing range is a lot better, and you don't have two guys behind him to cover. So that's something you could do. John Brooks can play that role as well if you need him to. I just think there are options, But Meg.
I'd say a combination of what Justin and Filippo said. I wouldn't be devastated if I see him in the roster next window. I think it's time, broadly speaking, one of my big things is in terms of depth, we're going to qualify. Let's get different people experience in that depth area and figure out whether it's the tactics or the positioning or the specific players. Let's get different people reps. I don't think he needs to be there, but if he is there, I won't be overly devastated. I think he can play a role.
Okay. Paul Arriola. Meg, want to start with you?
I think it's time for Paul. I think, I was really shocked by Greg's statement that he sees Paul and Brendan Aronson as the same player I think what he means is in terms of the heart and the hustle. And I think that there's validity to that piece. I think that Paul and Brendan both are two of the players who put some of the most effort in, but Brendan has so much more technical ability and performance backing him up. They're not the same player by a long stretch. And so I think it's, and I also think we have some depth in that position. So I don't think that we need to bring in Paul. So I don't see any reason, but I'd be shocked if we don't see him in the next window.
Yeah, me too. Tack.
Yeah, it's essentially that. It's what options do we have, right? And how many wingers are you going to bring? There's no way Greg's bringing more than 5 wingers. He's already done it. So let's go through a couple wingers here. Tim Weah, that's 1. Brendan Aronson, that's 2. He sees Gio Reyna as a winger, so that's 3. He sees Hoppy as a winger, so that's 4. Pulisic, hopefully he's healthy. That's 5. I can keep going. I'm pretty sure there's
Conrad.
more options. What?
Conrad.
Conrad, that was left out. That's 6. So
Yeah.
would you bring 7 wingers? Because that's where Poriola would start to get into the debate, right?
The
Okay, he can
conversation.
be here. What?
Yeah, no, the conversation.
Yeah, the conversation would start at number 7. Are you going to bring 7, 8 wingers? You're not. So there's no reason for him to be there unless out of these 6 wingers we mentioned, 3 or 4 are injured. Then yeah, you eventually start to get, all right, we need Poriola here.
Yeah, Justin.
I'm going to pile on. Even if you have injuries, we have Joaquini, we have Kevin Paredes, who is really good on the dribble, really good at taking players on. Emmanuel Sabi, who's playing in a weaker league in Denmark, but really been lights out. He's been his club's player of the month. He has, I think, 3 goals and 3 assists to start the season, so he's in really good form. These are players who do what wingers need to do, which is be able to go at defenses, create problems for the defense, create danger. Ariola doesn't do that.
Yeah. All right. And then last but not least, certainly, is Gyasi Zardes. Maybe one of the more controversial ones because I've heard a lot of different opinions of Gyasi. Tak, why don't we start with you?
This one is probably the only one I have to think a little bit, right? I'm not a big fan of Zardes myself, and he was terrible against Panama. But, for example, last game in 5 minutes, at the last 5 minutes, I didn't think he was bad. I thought he was pretty good, actually, in those 5 minutes against Costa Rica. But again, let's evaluate the options. Ricardo Pepi, how many center forwards are we bringing? I think 3 is all you need
Max.
for 2 games. Max. Yeah. So Ricardo Pepi has to be there, right? Been scoring goals for us. There's no justification to not bring him. The other option is I think Josh Sargent deserves to be back now. He's probably going to get a lot of minutes in the Premier League this month. Time to bring him back. He got a little bit of his punishment, or not even a punishment, right? Go settle down with your club. So I would actually bring Josh Sargent. And then the third option, it starts to become Zardes, Pifak, DK. But me personally, I would just have Hoppy as the other center forward option. So if it's me and I'm seeing Hoppy as a center forward, Zardes is out. But if it's a Greg Berhalter's idea, Hoppy comes out. He's a winger for Greg. And then you start to debate between Zardes, Pifak, DK, the options we have. And then honestly, out of those 3, I think all is fair, I would say. There's different arguments for each one. So I'm gonna be nice so I don't get called too much MLS hater, and so hopefully Rocco doesn't cut part of the payment for this, but I'm gonna keep Zardes. I would keep him as my 3rd option.
I thought you said that Hoppy was your 3rd option.
Yeah, but I'm going to consider Hoppy a winger because that's what Greg would consider. Gotcha. I'm just keeping I did that for Paul Riola, right? I said Reyna was a winger because of Greg. I got to be consistent in my argument. And Hoppy's a winger to Greg, so he's not an option. So I'll put him as my 3rd option, Zardes.
Okay. Justin?
I wouldn't take him. Like you said, you have Pepi, you have Sargent, you have Pifak, you have DK. DK's been in a little bit better form recently, and everyone in that group is younger than Zardes. I understand people who would try to make different arguments that Zardes is at a very similar level to Sargent or to Pifak or DK. There are different arguments you can make based on their strengths and weaknesses. I don't think that Zardes is very good with the ball at his feet. He can strike the ball very hard. He can put shots on goal that are difficult to defend, and he works hard. He presses well. Those are good things. But I don't think he's going to combine with the teammates the way that we saw last night this week from Ricardo Pepi with his one-touch layoffs. That's something that Sargent does add. And with him being 30 years old, Zardes, these other players are still coming into their ability. They're still coming into their prime, and we still have over a year until the World Cup. Yeah. Like you guys have been saying, we're going to qualify. The difference between Zardes and Sargent or Pifak or DK is not going to keep us from qualifying. So we should be using them so they can be growing and we can be taking the best possible options to Qatar.
That's a very good point, Justin. I think we do have to keep in mind, we're not just trying to qualify. We're trying to build cohesiveness and chemistry, but for the guys who are going to be in Qatar or more likely to be in Qatar. I don't have Zardes there. I currently have him 4th on my depth chart after, Pepi, Hoppy, and yes, still Sargent. Tak, you said that Zardes played well for the 5 minutes that he came on, and that is true. For me, that doesn't negate either his performance in Panama or the 30 minutes that he came on against Jamaica and missed some very key chances, which, a lot of people used he will score goals, he will finish chances, to defend Zardes. but he missed 3 or 4 good chances in about 25 minutes against Jamaica to finish this game off. And I just don't think that, 14 goals in 66 caps is a good enough return for a center forward. If you look at his entire national team career, we have better options. So yeah, I wouldn't have Zardes there unless one of those 3 is injured. Guys, does anybody else have anything to say before we close this off?
Meg, did you have thoughts on Zardes, or did you go already?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did Meg not go yet? I'm sorry.
No,
Go ahead.
You're good. But I'm just going to emphasize what all of you said. And I would say that actually behind Pepe, I want to see Hoppy get more minutes in there. I'm not convinced on Sargent. And I'd like to see PFOC Hoppy behind Pepe. But yeah, echoing what you guys said. And in terms of last thoughts, I just say that I feel really good about the next window. I felt good about this window, but I feel really good about the next window. And let's see who gets brought in. But I think Mexico at home is a must-win, should win. And I think Jamaica away, same thing. So I'm excited to see who gets brought in and what we do. But I'm feeling good, actually, at the moment, even the poor performances considered.
Yeah, I like that you just said Mexico is a must-win, should win. Do you agree, Justin and Filippo?
With our talent, yes.
Well,
with the manager and how things look, who knows?
So I this is the way I see it. Drawing Mexico at home, I don't think it's a disaster, depending on how we play, right? You could play a good game and Mexico gets lucky and gets a goal. And so if we have a draw with a terrible performance, a lucky draw, yeah, I agree. But I don't know. Personally, you want me to be honest? I'd rather us draw a 1-1, 2-2 and have a very good performance rather than win 1-0 with a set piece in Mexico pressing us. I personally would prefer that because I would see evolution of the team. And I know that performance, it's sustainable to get more wins rather than get a freaking extra time win with Miles Robinson. But the mentality should be what she said. It's like, hey, we're not here to draw Mexico. We're here to beat Mexico, but put up a good performance. Show that, because if you continue to do this, more points will come.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, just to tack onto that, this mantra in qualifying is win at home and draw on the road. And that's an okay mantra if the goal is to qualify. Again, with our talent, we should be the best in the region. Our goal should be to top the table and be trying to see if we can push into pot 2, pot 1 for qualification. But if you're going to say win at home, draw on the road, that includes Mexico. And that's part of why that is such a flawed strategy. The strategy should be take all of the points off of teams like Panama, Honduras, El Salvador. You should be taking every single one of those points so that it doesn't matter how you perform in Mexico as far as the standings and the place in qualification. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh, it's okay just to win at home and draw on the road, and it's okay to draw to Mexico. They're a good team. You have to pick.
Right. We also lost to Panama.
Yes.
So we failed.
Yeah, and we dropped points to
Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. Let's set the bar. I think what I've told people in the past is we have to set the bar based on the talent pool, right? The talent pool is here, and this is the bar that we shouldn't lower the bar of expectation just because we have a mediocre coach or because of past results. We have to set the bar where it should be, which is with the talent pool that we have is the best team in CONCACAF. And I think if we're consistent as media members, as fans, in setting that bar and demanding that, then we can talk. When we don't meet that bar, we can talk about why. But we shouldn't lower the bar because of either past results or our coach or other reasons, in my opinion.
Agreed.
And back to Filippo's point, we did drop points to El Salvador as well.
Yeah, and Canada.
No, but we technically tied them away, right? They say it's good. I agree.
Okay, so that's fitting with.
I agree that we dropped. But technically, based on their standards, we're okay there.
Right,
okay.
And we did draw at home with Canada, which is already not acceptable.
Which is not okay.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming. Meg, can you just tell people your Twitter handle real quick? I'll put it in the description as well, but where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm at Meg_Swanick.
All right. If you guys know how to spell that, it's on her name right there. Justin Moran, as always, at Kicks Wish. Filippo Silva, you're going to have to call Rocco's office to get in touch with him because that's
he's my agent now. It depends on if he'll let you guys follow me or not. It depends on where your affiliation is with, but man, Rocco, the checks are coming in late. I haven't gotten them yet.
He's been concerned. There's not enough anger at USSF, and that's on you, Filippo. Guys, thanks for coming. This was very productive, good, in-depth conversation. Thanks for watching, everybody. Leave your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about the roster, the future, the next window? I will talk to you all soon.